Hello, I want to welcome everybody to the CCW Safe podcast. I'm your host, Rob High, and we have so many new members. Our growth has been pretty exceptional, and we're so thankful for all you guys. But I think not everybody that's new understands how we got our start and where we came from. And we are very fortunate today to have our founders with us today. I've got Mike Darter here. He's our CEO, and Stan Campbell over here, our COO.
That's right. Celebrating a 100th episode.
100th episode of our podcast. Yeah. So we are so honored that you guys are joining in, and I'd like to start this off with just having Mike give us a little bit and telling us about the start of CCW Safe and how you came up and developed this model.
So. Yeah. So I'm Mike Darter. It's good to be back on. We haven't been on in a while.
It's been a while.
Stan and I used to do these podcasts. So CCW Safe started in 2011, 12 is when I left ATF. I was working in ATF Dallas as a contractor over one of the violent crimes programs. And earlier in my career as a police officer, I was sued in federal court on a shooting and was sued civilly. Went to about a year and a half of a civil trial and won that case. It got kicked out at summary judgment, but it took a year and a half to get there. So, and at the time I was a fraternal order police member. They paid for everything. I didn't have to, pay for any attorneys or expert witnesses that we had to bring in on the case. So everything was taken care of. And while it was stressful for my partner and I at the time, Mike Kelly, it really wasn't a huge concern because it wasn't, we just had to be wherever we needed to be when they told us to be there. So, and we knew, we had a good feeling of the case. It was a good case. It wasn't anything that we were worried about. But later, when I left law enforcement, not having that, protection was concerning, especially after, being through it once. So Kyle Sweet, who is the other partner, who is our general counsel, called and talked to Kyle and said, hey, man, I need some kind of coverage. I had 3 daughters, 20 years in law enforcement. I was going to carry. I'd already been involved in a shooting, sued in federal court. So Kyle said, hey, let's, I probably need something too. Kyle's former law enforcement. So he called back days later and said, man, there's nothing out there that's available that is going to give you the same protection. There were insurance policies available, but nothing was going to give you the same protection that I had as an officer. So he said, we need to do this. So, we did it, and it took about 6 months to a year to put the infrastructure together and get all that done. But that was really the formation of this, was out of a need for ourselves to have something that was, similar to what we had as police officers.
And just to piggyback what Mike is talking about, one of the things that we find important about this model, most people don't know, police officers, when they're involved in a shooting, they're treated like a victim of a violent encounter. Citizens are treated like suspects. So one of the things that CCW Safe has done was we've taken that same response and also the resources that officers get, and we transferred it over to citizens and also off-duty officers and such. So now you too are able to have that sense of comfort knowing that you have a team behind you, like we did when we were in law enforcement.
That's a great point, Stan. And it's one of those things that instead of having to reinvent the wheel, that wheel was already there.
Correct.
And all we had to do was kind of bring that together and make it where it's an option that a citizen could take advantage of as well. It's been such a privilege to be part of this team. I'd like to ask you, what, in your opinion, what is the biggest, most valuable asset to our members?
Well, very good question. in reference to assets to our membership group and those that we take care of, when I look at what we've done over the past 10 years, I find that a lot of our strengths have to do with our benefit package. But in reference to forming the company, our critical response team is probably the most significant thing that we have that sets us apart from our competitors. And the reason why that is so important, because boots on the ground, I mean, you just can't beat that.
Yeah.
We have that when we were police officers, homicide detectives come out, administrators come out, all the people that you would need to take care of you on the crime scene and when you're involved in the shooting is there for you. Peer support. We've created and put that stuff together for our membership group.
Right.
And all of our competitors, although sometimes in name only, they say they have a critical response team. I mean, it's nothing compared to what we have.
Yeah.
We have former homicide detectives and other investigators that go to the scene and actually do boots on the ground. There's nothing like boots on the ground. And we've had several instances over the past several years where we responded to deadly force incidents and were there for our members. We've had some where the investigator assisted the local investigators in locating, cameras, witnesses, all those things that are important to do in the first 48 hours of a case. And we were able to, like in the Stephen Mattis case, for instance, although that took about 2 years to finish up, the prosecutor and that investigative team didn't start looking for witnesses until about 1.5 years in.
Yeah.
We had it all wrapped up in 1 week. It's very important.
Yeah.
We had another case in Las Vegas, in which we had a member that had all 3 of the major competitors at the time, us and 2 others that were, on the top in the industry. All 3 of us he made 3 phone calls to each agency, and we were the only ones that went out there and had boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And that's very important. And we recently had an incident in which Gary Eastridge went out on.
Right.
So boots on the ground, you just can't beat it. It's important to have somebody there for you because in this particular case, it's an affirmative defense saying, I shot that guy right there. It's still a homicide.
Right.
So you have to bring evidence to support your actions to show that this is a homicide that is justifiable.
Yeah.
And that's what our team is for. We do that for you so you don't have to have any worries.
That's a great point.
And I think that's the biggest thing when I reached out to Kyle, when he said, there's nothing available like that is going to provide that protection. I don't think at the time there were very few companies at the time, but they were all insurance companies. I don't think there was any of them that really had a good understanding of how investigations work,
Correct.
actually being involved in investigations. When we started, Kyle and myself all had law enforcement experience. Gary Eastridge came on very early. He had a pretty immense law enforcement history. He's actually the homicide detective who interviewed me on my shooting, that started this whole thing years ago. And having that knowledge and then being able to apply that to a response team, of somebody going out that actually has worked cases, hundreds, not just one case, they've worked hundreds of cases of shooting cases like this. And then, Don West came on pretty early. So that was, especially early on, I think was huge for us in the industry.
Absolutely. And then, just to piggyback, other benefits and assets for our membership group, we're one of the few, I think we're really the only one that actually covers appeals. Something happens in one of your cases and it just goes wrong, but, you still have us there for you. Appeal starts the process over again. And then you have to, pay for a second trial. Most folks don't have that. They have recoupment policies where you have to pay them back first what they put out on the first trial before they pay for a second trial. Well, we don't do that. We just start all over with benefits and we just push right into the next challenge.
Right.
So that's important. Expungements, cleaning up your record, having it so that all of your legal is taken care of. So your criminal and civil and administrative, there's no caps on that.
Right.
So that's very special for us to do that. And what people don't understand too, there's a lot of misinformation out there with these groups in which they say they're going to cover certain things, but please know that it's not all about lawyers, because your investigators, your expert witnesses, they make and break the case. And we pay for that separate from the attorney's fees and the other things that go along with it. It's really important. I mean, you can have hundreds of thousands in expert witnesses and investigators.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in one case I think the investigators just weeks in was $40,000, around $40,000. So, yeah, those add up.
Yeah, the cost of a criminal defense is unbelievably steep. And we've discussed the critical response team and the boots on the ground thing. The other thing about that, Phil and I have talked several times on our podcast that it's really a big deal to vet your instructors and go out and find guys that are really the real deal, because there's a lot of self-promoting people out there that build themselves up to be something that they're really not. And you can go through some of their classes and if nothing else, the thing you learn what to do is what not to do. And so one of the things that I always put out there is, as you're vetting an instructor, find out what that instructor's training history is. Are they still training? Are they still going and seeking additional training and continuing to hone their skill to be better for you? That's one of the things that Mike and Stan have allowed us to do, the guys on the critical response team, is we still get to continue that education. Last year we had a course with Texas DPS, the Texas Rangers, on investigating officer-involved shootings. And the response that we give our members is really, really similar to that officer-involved shooting. You touched on that a little bit earlier. We're handling you as a victim, not as a suspect in this case. So being able to stay current and up to date and get the best, most modern investigative techniques and those kind of things are really, really a big deal. Another benefit that we have, Mike mentioned our general trial counsel, Kyle Sweet, another one of our founders. Kyle's law firm is part of the National FOP Defense, and so any officers that are involved in the line of duty incident, if that is a really severe use of force or a shooting or something like that, as his team responds and brings those officers in to prepare them, our critical response team also comes in with their debrief and help prep these guys for their formal statements when they go to homicide. And so the bonus with that is we get to stay current and up to date. We're always current with the law and how things are going in the courts. And the fact that, Gary's been involved in a shooting, you've been involved in a shooting. We've worked, I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of shootings. I've had family members involved in a shooting. So we actually really have a full grasp of how all that factors in responding to our members. Because I understand what it's like, not just to be involved in some of these really horrible, significant incidents, but I've been the family member on the other side of that, and understanding that it doesn't just affect the person with the gun in their hand.
Absolutely.
It affects everybody involved.
Yeah.
That includes all your extended family. So those are really, really big deals for us.
That too is like the importance of, we don't just throw money at the case.
Right.
We're there with you the whole way. we still, like, to this day, have a relationship with Stephen Maddox, and his shooting was in 2015, and we covered him in 2017 for his trial. And people don't understand the importance of having someone there for you if you start running into some dark times, and have someone there that you can call upon. And that's one of the things we do as well. If you need psychological assistance, we have people that take care of that.
Yep.
Peer support, which is really big. Because that's what we had when we were on this police department. We had peer support, so we built that for our members as well. And then speaking of what you and Gary do for Sweet Law and the active duty shootings, the inner line of duty shootings, kind of talk for 1 second about some of the lessons that you learned, or even like what you learned from the officers, like what they don't know in reference to preparing for their official statement.
Oh, yeah.
And trauma memory and such.
There's so many things about being involved in an incident like that. Especially if there's multiple people, and even if it was just the three of us and Stan was involved in a shooting, what I see is going to be different than what Stan recalls, and Mike's going to see it from a little bit different perspective than what I saw. So we don't have to have exact matching stories. That's understandable because you have different perspectives. The other thing is yes, you've been involved in this thing, and the bonus with police officers is most police officers in the country now get a couple of sleep cycles before they have to go in and make a statement.
Correct.
That's part of the whole treating somebody like a victim versus treating them as a suspect.
Correct.
And to have these guys come in and have a recollection of the things that went on, but maybe the sequence of events is a little jumbled and out of order. It's not like a video that you can just replay in your mind. It's kind of distorted and out of place. And it's a really big deal to understand that that's a really normal response. That's
right.
just how your brain responds to such a traumatic incident. It's a survival thing for us. It's kind of deep in our primitive brain that takes care of us that way.
Yes, sir.
So that's a really big deal to understand those things. Some of the other parts about that is just your recollection doesn't have to be exact. And if you don't know, don't know. Don't try to make something up to fit the pieces or anything like that. And to be able to reassure guys like that. I was talking about how you respond to an incident like that. We've touched on it on some of our other podcasts. If you rolled up on a scene on a police shooting and you found a guy sitting down on the ground, back against his car or something, just crying because it was such a big deal to him that just emotionally he just has to let loose. That's a normal response. It's the same as if you had a different guy involved in that same incident and he goes over in the corner and he throws up. That's a normal reaction. That's
Correct.
a normal response. The same thing if you rolled up on that same incident and you see the guy and he's all excited and he's high-fiving his partner. He's not excited that he killed somebody. He's really excited that he just survived the most horrific incident in his life. That's a normal response.
Correct.
What your response is okay.
Absolutely.
And we don't hide that. We don't try to cover that up or anything else. We can explain why these things happen. I was talking about the continuing education and the things that we keep getting you to do. We hosted Force Science Institute last year, and we provided that training not only for ourselves, but for a whole bunch of local law enforcement guys. And we brought them here instead of having to spend tons of money for those guys to travel and go outside and do something on their own. That's just one of the most invaluable training programs as far as uses of force
Absolutely.
that's available in the country. So
And I'm going to circle back on that, but being that you still talk about critical incidents and taking someone's life, being that we have someone right here that's done that. Mike, about how long did it take for you, like, to really get a grasp of the details that occurred and fill in the blanks of the story, even after you got interviewed? Because it takes a while to get all the answers.
I know it was at least a day or two because I know that, like, when I got home that night, I think the shooting happened around 1 o'clock or midday. And by the time we got to homicide and went through our interview and everything, and at that time they did an interview that immediately.
that day, yeah.
But you were allowed to come back a week later or a few days later and make any changes that you needed to. And I remember that night, just thinking, just sitting there kind of thinking like what happened? Like trying to recall stuff. Rob touched on one thing, like how you react. Like you can think you're going to react one way or think, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm not. For example, one thing is, a lot of people say, don't say anything to the police when they arrive or don't talk to them or whatever. And our philosophy is kind of along the lines. It's give them general information, tell them you'd love to help them with the investigation, but you're not in a mindset to do that. Unless you've had a lot of training, I'm talking like at least, a week, a month, or consistent training over years, are you going to be able to do that?
Yeah.
Because when something hits like that, it's human nature to want to justify your actions, and it's human nature to want to actually, like, you fill in the blanks with what you think you did and what you thought you might have done, but you don't know. So it's really hard to do that. And like he said, whatever you do can be justified because it is a traumatic incident that you're going through. You're critical stress, your mind, you don't remember things. And I think it took a few days before I really grasped onto it. And it was a very numbing, in our case, there were 2 suspects killed. And if you've ever lost somebody close to you, a parent, a sibling, something, you kind of get a numb feeling.
Yeah.
It was that same way, you kind of have this numbness to you for days to a week that kind of takes time to wear off, and trying to recall all that is the same. And I think I went in about a week later and reread the report. I don't think there were any major changes, but there's even years later, Mike Kelly and I have talked about it. He was my partner in that shooting. We were the 2 that actually shot. And, we remember things different, like years later, 10 years later, we talked about it and I was like, wait a minute, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
So there's things that you place into, whether it's subconsciously or, somebody said something that you overheard at the time that you bring into it or something like that. So it's very, and it takes a lot of training to be able to pick up on that.
Correct.
And that's the thing with the Maddox case. There's a lot of departments out there that don't have resources to train their officers a lot if it's a smaller department and I'm not saying that some small departments are on it.
Yeah.
It just jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and departments, agencies are different in the way they train, and it takes a lot to have officers who are very well trained that can pick up on that.
Yeah, and Mike hit on a lot of great points. One specifically is just general information. If you're going to have an official interview or be interrogated, that's what that will be. Please only do so in front of your attorney and let them know you're going to cooperate, but you'll give a detailed explanation in front of your attorney. That way, we have the time to get in there. We can set up that interview for you and make sure that you're ready for it. Second to that, just like Mike said, years later, you're not going to remember what happened. If you take someone's life, it's just an unnatural thing to take a human life. If you do, it stays with you forever. That memory of it is going to be with you. You're going to have to deal with, your family's going to deal with, like Rob talked about. And, circling back to what Rob was discussing with Force Science Institute, we brought folks in to teach the local law enforcement trainers about through their de-escalation program. And Mike and I have hit this on,
Yeah.
a whole bunch of podcasts talking about avoidance and de-escalation and the importance of that, because you need to know that just because you have a firearm, it does not mean that you should engage in everything. Sometimes it's best to be a really good witness versus an involved person, unless you're truly being ambushed or someone's trying to hurt you or your family, But other than that, think like a policeman, but don't try to be one. So that means that prepare yourself for a violent encounter, but don't try to look for one. Right. Your last resort should be pulling the trigger. But to get back onto what we do for you, CCW Safe is really good about, preparing you for the second fight. The first fight was that you saved your life for that of someone else. But the second fight is, what happens during the aftermath. But what we try to do with our content, and we do a really good job of getting ahead of that, letting you learn from other people's mistakes. And this is across the nation, shooting incidents, concealed carriers, with Don West and Sean Vincent, Mike, myself, Rob, Gary, and some of the others, and Don West, getting that information in front of you so that you guys can learn from others and try not to be in the situation that they're in, correct?
Yeah, that's a big deal.
And there's one thing I wanted to touch on too. One thing that kind of got brought up earlier, but there's a lot of little things that people don't know or wouldn't be aware of when you're dealing with somebody like who has been involved in this, like diet plans, exercise plans, like dealing with companies who are going to fire you because you've been arrested or you have charges that may be coming on you for murder or other charges. And we've dealt with all that. And there's a lot of little things that go on behind the scenes to try to, like you said, keep somebody prepared well for that second fight, that because of all the experience we have and the people we work with have, they know about that. So
That's a great point, Mike. Let's pick back up on that when we come back. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to bring you a message from our National Trial Counsel, Don West, and we will start right back up where we left off. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Don West, National Trial Counsel for CCW Safe and a board-certified criminal trial lawyer. The financial cost of defending a self-defense case involving serious injury or death may surprise you. I know this firsthand from personal experience. Attorney's fees alone can be several $100,000, but that's not all. You need money, and plenty of it, for private investigators, expert witnesses, and of course to pay the bail bond company so you can get out of jail. All this could easily add up to $400,000 or $500,000 or more, especially if it's a high-profile case. Without the money you need to put on your best defense, you're at a terrible disadvantage to an aggressive prosecutor, and consequently you have a greater risk of being wrongfully convicted. That's why CCW Safe doesn't put limits on attorney's fees or trial expenses like most other plans do. So, when comparing companies, take a minute and read the fine print. You can be confident that with CCW Safe, the money will be there when you need it.
Welcome back. As we were talking earlier, Mike was speaking on the things that you don't realize are going to come into play. And it's keeping somebody kind of grounded as they move forward, going through the legal processes and the unexpected things that can come and kind of trip you up. You mentioned losing your job. That happened in Stephen's case, in Maddox's case. What are some of the other things that you see going along with those things? Because we've discussed how it affects everybody in your circle. Not just your family, but your friends, and it can cost a marriage or there's so many stresses and things like that built in.
Oh yeah, another thing, in cases we've seen are ankle bracelets. You can only go to work and home.
Yeah.
Can you imagine for 2 years only been able to go to work and home? In one case, we had to We had to get approval from a judge to be able to go to a funeral.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours away. If you get outside a limit with the ankle bracelet, it vibrates on your ankle every 30 minutes or whatever, or maybe even more than that. Every time that thing vibrates, it's a reminder that, hey, you maybe, this is what you're facing. This is what you're going through. And there's a lot of things, jobs. If you lose your job, in one case, they were going to fire a member and give him 3 weeks pay. We ended up getting him a year's severance package on that thing. They just didn't, it's like, hey, you can't do this. There is a process that you go through, a court process. So there's a lot of things: diet, exercise, keeping their mind right, and that's a lot where around that time is when we implemented the core values, because the core values that we have 5 core values, and each one of them, deal with, experience, deals with the experience that we have, experience in leadership, commitment, dedication, caring. Each one of them, and especially in the Maddox case, he actually came back and wanted to do videos on each core value and where he saw it, because he saw it over that 2-year process. Correct. He saw it through different actions that we did. And, there was no, and I don't know still to this day, the other companies in the industry, if they have core values listed on their website, but, we believe in those. That was something that we all, as law enforcement, we had to have in our recruit classes. We had to pick basically a core. They didn't call it a core value, but we had to pick a core value that defined who we were.
Yeah.
And so that was very important to Stan and I, and at the time, Stan and I and Kyle, to get that implemented, to kind of let people know what we stand for. I mean, if you're going to pay us annual or monthly fee to do this, you need to know what we believe in, and how far we're going to go, to fight for your freedom or for your rights. So,
yeah. So it really was important, like Mike said, for us to establish core values, and we stand behind it. Our models, based upon it, and also the benefits are aligned with our core values. Some of the things we're talking about, you have no idea how important it is to have an experienced team.
Yeah.
There's companies out there that may have some lawyers, or they may have, folks that have a really good magazine, but when it comes down to, or some that train you well for paper shooting, but if someone has not walked in your shoes, it's kind of hard to relate to that person. Yeah. We've done that. We've been there, and we understand your needs, and that's why our benefits package are aligned with what you need as a person involved in this violent encounter and the most traumatic incident you ever will be involved in your life. So between that and caring, people know already. You can tell when you look at our website, when you look at some of our content, when you see us on video, like even now, you can tell when somebody just throwing some lines or they actually care. Yeah. We actually care about our members. We're there for you. It's important for you to have someone that can build a dream team for you so that you don't have to worry about it. And that's what we do. So all of the things that we do, align with our core values. We're really happy to be here for our members and to continue that dedication for you, until the end.
And one thing I just want to say right quick, when talking about putting together all these experts for you and attorneys, that also has to be fluid. And a lot of people get locked into, well, I want to know who my attorney is. Well, if we said, okay, well, this is your attorney in your area, and your shooting happens when he's in Aruba on vacation with his family, or it happens when he already just committed to a catastrophic case, and you're going to be second, and you're not going to get him, but you're going to get the junior lawyer. All this has to be fluid, and that's why we're so thankful to have Don West to be able to go out at any time, and we have attorneys across the country that we've worked with up to this point, but they may not be available. Mm-hmm. So to be able to have somebody like Don West and be fluid in everything that we do, and be able to pull in experts from across the country if we need somebody in an area.
Absolutely. And then back on Don West real quick, for those who are brand new to CCW Safe, Don West was co-counsel for the George Zimmerman trial. And he vets all of our attorneys that we hire, the local attorneys that we hire for you. The importance of that, because a lot of companies, they will throw you a long list of Second Amendment, advocates that are attorneys, but that does not mean that they put in the time or have the trial experience associated with defending you. And that's what Don West makes sure it happens. Also, the way that a lot of the attorney firms are set up, you may not get the top guy, you'll get the junior attorneys, working on your case. And we make sure that doesn't happen with our members. We make sure you get the top guy. That's why we have Don West, sign into agreement with them, to manage and to be your advocate for your defense as well, to make sure that everyone's doing their job like they're supposed to. They have the resources they're supposed to get, and everything's done in a timely manner. There is no downtime on your case.
And Kyle Sweet too, our general counsel. Kyle Sweet is he's one of the very few attorneys who actually tries catastrophic cases, and he's done them over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. So having him there too is amazing.
Well, it's one of those that you talk about that, and it's also very important as far as your legal defense to understand, yes, I know this guy and he's a fantastic, highly successful defense attorney. There's so much difference between a guy that does a regular criminal defense and somebody that understands uses of force and does what we refer to, you touched on it earlier, an affirmative defense, that we're not trying to say, no, we didn't do this.
Correct.
We're not running away from it. I was backed into a corner. I didn't have any other options available to me at that time. And in order to survive, or in order for this guy to not kill my buddy or something like that, I had to step in and intervene. That's the way that gets shut down. I was really lucky. I'm the oldest guy in the room, but both of these guys had a hand in training me when I was a new officer. So I've known these guys for decades. I count them as family. One of the other things that we have is all of us were defensive tactics instructors. We all were a part of teaching officers how to properly apply force.
That's correct.
It was never about punishing. It was never about anything more than just controlling. And I've mentioned before the numbers of times that, as far as by letter of the law, I could have justifiably discharged my weapon at another human, and the abilities from the training I received all through my career, I had other options. I had other tools available to me. And one of the things that you guys did early on before I came in was, all law enforcement across the country have to deploy force within a model, within a use of force continuum.
Correct.
I can only go so far depending on the violator's actions.
That's correct.
And we've always kind of been very strict on judging ourselves, but that was something you guys did, was develop kind of a use of force continuum for citizens as well. So you want to touch on that a little bit, Mike?
Yeah, and like you just had mentioned before, I was backed into this place where I had no other option. And that's a lot of people, and you hear this all the time, when people go through a concealed carry course, they're like, okay, I got my deal done. Now, when am I legal to shoot someone? Or when, and that question is all. And what the real question should be is, at what point have I exhausted every means to where I have no other option but to shoot this person? So, and that's what Stan and I got together, because we didn't really, there were kind of a mention of use of force for citizens, but there really wasn't anything out there. And so we, like Rob said, because we had been involved with training, self-defense, custody and control most of our careers, we developed one. And for citizens, it's exactly that. It's, you have to exhaust every available mean to de-escalate and get yourself out of that situation before you take action. Because that's how the investigation is going to go. And we built this kind of based on reaction, but also investigation, and how this thing is going to be looked at. Because they're going to look at, if you get involved in a shooting, they're going to look at that moment where the shooting happened, and they're going to start working forward and backwards incrementally. And we really kind of did it a lot different than what, in fact, we had to really explain to it when we talked about it, but we did it based off of location, number one. Typically we are, creatures of habit. We have our daily interactions are habitual. They're going to work, to lunch. If you go to work, you usually drive, one way. Some people will switch it up like you should and kind of take different routes. You usually have about 3 places that you eat. So you have to know your area. And if you are familiar with your area, you can get on most websites, police websites today, and look at crime reports and see where it is in the area. If you're visiting somewhere, and then we did this actually when I was coming out to see you in LA one time, because I stayed downtown and I got on and looked and I was like, okay, where can I go from here? Because I wasn't familiar with the area I was staying in. And you could immediately see just like south and west, there were tons of reports over the last, 3 months for robberies and all that. But to the, the other direction, there wasn't a whole lot going on. So it was immediately, okay, that's where I'm going to go. So we kind of made it on the situational awareness actually came second.
That's correct.
Based on a model of, our model was like put on this table, and the table is the knowledge of knowing your surroundings,
Correct.
Where to go. And then it went from, situational awareness up. But each level, like it's in law enforcement, it's often a pyramid or a triangle, and you have your lower level and it goes up to where you run out of options, basically. And every level that we created, which we'll put a link to on the show, had a attempt to de-escalate and exit. Get away from that.
So, and the importance of that, what Mike's talking about as well. Number one, if the closest 7-Eleven real world is a half a block away, but all of the robberies occur there, and the one is two blocks away or a mile away, that's the one you go to. Don't go to what's close, because you may be setting yourself up for interaction with a deadly situation, because there's so many robberies there. Second to that, Mike's talking about the avenue of escape or the avoidance at each level that we've created this. Because you do have a window, when your life is being threatened or great bodily injury by someone that is an attacker. But if anything changes in that, they throw the weapon down, if they de-escalate, if they move back, if they don't have the opportunity, to do so any longer, to go along with their threat, you therefore have to, even if you had the window at that moment before they drop the knife, once that happens, you can't use force. Then you disengage, get behind cover, and then call the police. A lot of times too, that went along with our continuum. Don't forget, just like officers, call for backup, call the police. Don't be the one that just moves forward if you don't have to. You want to be tactical, but at the same time be smart, because the greatest weapon that you have during a violent encounter is here. It's your mind, and making those right decisions so that you can survive the incident. We also talk about, as part of this on the side, things change when you have your family with you. You may not engage fully if there is, you're going to leave your family behind and they'll be vulnerable. You have to get them to safety. You have to find yourself a place, just like even Mike said, like setting up when you're in restaurants, sitting so that you can see the doorway. When you're pulling up to the gas stations, don't pull right in front of the door. Pull away so you can see the counter and see what's going on. Make sure that the clerk's doesn't have their hands up.
Yeah.
You know, be aware. You run into people that kind of hang out at these places, so you have to watch out for those folks. You know, your aggressive panhandlers and stuff like that. Watch what people are doing. See if they're looking at you when you pull up. You know, the phone can be your greatest asset or your worst enemy.
Yeah.
If you're sitting up here and your face is down on your phone, you start to lose all those things. So make sure that you're aware. You know, if you're on the phone, tell somebody, hey, I'm pulling up to, you know, the convenience store. Let me call you right back. That way, you're aware of what's going on without any distractions.
Yeah, that was a great point. And you're talking about that window. You know, our critical response manager, Gary, always discusses that window, and your window may be open and shut, or it just may be open. I mean, you never ever know. I've always liked one of the things that you've always talked about, and it's how would you deal with this situation if you didn't have a gun?
Absolutely.
You know, that's a big deal. Is before I start thinking about pulling my gun, what would I do if I didn't have it? And if you have that option, that's your option. That's your correct answer. That's the way out. That's a big deal. Carrying a firearm is such a tremendous responsibility. I know I've touched on it multiple times, and I always talk about, if you're going to carry, you need to put in check and basically eliminate your emotional response. You can't be emotional on that anymore. You have to understand the weight of that responsibility, and it's huge. You know, one of the things that some of our competitors will really press is, you know, if you have to defend yourself, if this happens, if that happens, you're going to get sued, and this is going to happen, and we're going to give you all of this civil liability. I think it's really important to understand that the criminal liability needs to be your very first thought.
Yeah.
Because if I don't come through cleanly on the criminal end, the civil end doesn't matter. I'm going to be incarcerated. So that's one of the other things I've always been so proud about, to talk to our members or prospective guys. You know, we were down in Houston for the big NRA annual meeting this year, and we got to meet thousands of people down there, and to be able to explain to them the fact that it doesn't matter. There's not a limit on our defense when it comes time to defending our members. Whatever it takes to get there is what we're doing.
Yeah, and you know, and I think Gary wrote an article on this about budgeting your defense.
Yes.
You don't want to do that. You know, some of these organizations are set up so that that's what you have to do, because if you get, you know, arrested for murder, you may find yourself with a $500,000 bond, which, you know, $50,000 of that will have to come out of your defense funds. And, you know, all of our stuff is separated. And then you have the attorney. If an attorney across the nation, you can check your own, just Google it if you want to. An attorney on a murder case, the retainer, just to start the case, is $100,000. Yeah. And then it may take, like mathematics takes, you know, a little bit over $200,000 we'll end up spending on that. You know, and that's just for the attorney. And then you start breaking it down. And like I said, I know you guys, you know, saw Don West break down, you know, what it is to deal with this defense and how much it costs, the cost of the, you know, your defense. But people don't understand how important it is not to have to make a decision. Do I go with a more expensive investigator, or do I hold off and get this expert witness? Which both of them can help the attorney save your case, because the attorney does not do it alone, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So it's important to, you know, really know, you know, what you're getting into, and make sure you have the right team behind you.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
And you may get to the end and realize, oh, I don't have enough for this.
Correct.
This expert that I really need. So let's go with this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big
scary.
deal. Yeah, and because when we talk about unlimited criminal defense funds, that's talking about that investigator. That's talking about those experts. It's talking about all inclusive, including your attorney, including a jury consultant, or whatever else it is that we need to put in place to give us the best opportunity to defend you after you've already had this horrible incident happen in your life, and now we got to survive this next one. So that's just a really big deal. I love the fact that I can go in and I can tell these guys, you're going to get decades of experience coming to walk you through this thing, and then if it's something that winds up having to go before a jury and goes into a courtroom, we're going with you as far as it takes to go. So that's a huge thing.
And before we, because I know we're getting close on rounding this out, but I want to talk about some of the lessons that we learned from being here in the industry for 10 years and working hundreds of cases over the past several years. The thing about what we do that's different from most others is that we protect you from you, and that's the reason why we give you the information. Sometimes those with a gun, they have that false sense of macho, and you have to pull that away. That's when Rob was talking about, think about what you would do if you didn't have a firearm. Would you move forward? The biggest problem that we run into with our members, and really nationally is a problem, road rage incidents and brandishing incidents.
Yeah.
You guys have to understand that if you show your weapon, you have to think about it like, could I pull the trigger at this time? If you're not in a situation where you couldn't pull the trigger, don't point your firearm at them. Don't pull your weapon unless you do get this feeling of someone has a weapon. Then yes, do that. But these unarmed folks that you're showing your firearm to, and you're driving down the road, picking it up and just saying, "Hey, I have one," stop flipping me off. You're going to get yourself in trouble or get yourself end up in jail. A lot of these states are not playing around with you guys. Yeah. And it costs, about $10,000 or more for an attorney just to fight that. Mm-hmm. And it's more of a battle than a homicide, So, it's pretty interesting that, we really we can get so many of these that, it's time for you guys to kind of just take a breath. When someone is involved in a verbal confrontation with you or a vehicle confrontation with you, remember that you have the gun. So the person with the gun should de-escalate. Yeah. So always think about that, because you don't want to step beyond what the law protects you to do.
Yeah. And if you do, you have to own that. You have to notify law enforcement. A lot of people will not notify law enforcement, and that's where a big problem comes in, because they're like, oh, well, the guy took off, it's over. It's not over, because they're going to go call the police.
That's right.
That happens every time. So if you do, you have to call the police.
Yeah, the first one that calls 911 across the nation is the victim.
Yeah.
So you have to be mindful that you're the first one to call 911. In that case.
Well, I want to thank you guys so much for making time and coming in and sitting with us.
Absolutely, it's number one.
Did you dream that we would be where we're at when you started?
No. No. We saw it as it started building. We kind of built the plane in the air initially. And honestly, when we initially put this together, we really just wanted to cover Oklahoma and Texas. Yeah. And within a few months, we had half the country.
Yeah, you had no choice but to go countrywide.
So it's been an honor to be able to put this together and work with the people that we have. Are amazing. We have the best people I know in the industry. We have made so many, friendships, and we've got so many relationships across the country now with some of the top, experts in the field, with departments. We work a lot with NYPD, retired officers, and it's just been an awesome journey. So.
Yeah, and then on my side, I'm just happy that, number one, we've not just surround ourselves with great staff, but our ambassadors and, like Mike said, the experts that we've become friends with. We are really careful about who we align ourselves with, because CCW Safe is important to us, and it's important to you guys. And we want to be here for you, as long as we can, to be, your support system if you're ever involved in a shooting incident or use of force in which, you need us. So I'm happy to be here. We're going to keep it going, and this is a great group. Continue to watch our podcasts, continue to read our articles, because you can learn a lot from them, and be safe out there.
Yeah, knowledge is power. Thanks, guys, for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing everybody again next week. Thank you so much. Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.